all the styes are empty now, and I filled them with wood because I've got 2 wood burners. So I'll fill them up with wood. I've got about a quarter of an acre, half an acre of woodland as well. So I go and collect it. And I've been chainsawing this last week.
Yeah, I've got 2 wood burning stoves and an outside fire.
All right.
That sort of keeps me busy.
Yeah.
I've got a little old grey Fergie tractor as well, which I potter around with sometimes.
But you've still got it, have you? Because I inherited my dad's. He got it in 1949. One of the petrol paraffin.
Mine's a petrol TVO, yeah.
Yeah, that's my TVO, yeah.
Last one I saw of that was Winston Churchill, that had belonged to Winston Churchill, and a friend of mine had it on a Welsh hill farm, and someone left the handbrake off, and it literally went down the hill and was in the stream, forever in the stream below, disintegrating because it was impossible to get out.
Right. Yeah.
Mine has got a handbrake, but you've got a brake. It's kind of a catch that you put on the main brake on the pedal.
Yeah,
it clicks into place, so it's no handbrake.
It might well have been that hadn't been put on the pedal.
Yeah. I haven't got a handbrake. I've got a little link box. It's on the back of it, and it's all been converted to 12 volts. So one of the things I've got to do tomorrow probably is go down. I keep it in a shed just about 100 yards away.
Yeah.
To go down there and see if I can get it started up.
Yeah, mine's still 6 volt. So, and I had to get a new battery a couple of years ago, and it cost me an arm and a leg to get a 6 volt battery.
Yeah.
Well, it's nearly that time. I need to get hold of Ali to see if he's ready. Ali, are you ready? You maybe have an internet connection. So
it's already.
He's obviously got an internet problem. So, are we ready, Ali, to go live?
Yes, we're ready, John.
Thank you. Fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company, wherever you are in this world, whatever time zone you're in, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe and connecting the world. No, it's not. It's entirely wrong. We are on Sunday night, Monday night. Get your calendar in your head, John. Hold on. I'm just getting my brain back. Better. It's Worldwide Story Round.
Yes.
In conjunction with Get a Word in Edgeways. And
yes.
Of course, from Get a Word in Edgeways, we have the founder, the MC, the magnificent Mike Rust, who will be guiding us through proceedings tonight. Mike, over to you.
Hello, John. How are you?
Well, obviously, I'm forgetting which day it is.
Yeah, it's all in lockdown. One day can feel very much the same as the others. I do get that, especially these last couple of days in the UK here, because they've had 2 or 3 days almost been exactly the same in weather as well.
Absolutely.
So anyway, well, it's in my end of England, Keith, in Shropshire. The weather's been pretty these last couple of days or so, and they've been pretty much the same. I don't know what it's like over in Northern Ireland, Colin. So you're on mute, Colin, if you can hear me.
I think it's been the same just as everywhere else. We'd had a really, really cold spell there, kind of thawed last night, and it's horrible and grey and miserly today. But it was nice there, really cold and hard there for a few days.
We had it when the ground all froze over, which is a good time to go and get wood out of woods, Keith, because the ground's all frosted. And you can get into the wet bits without getting stuck and things like that. Yeah. And Janet, it's lovely to see you again. Now, remind me, you're Northampton. Staffordshire. Now, I'm very close. Okay, there's only the West Midlands in between. Okay.
No.
That's right. You're just about on the edge of the moorlands, aren't you?
More or less. I'm actually in the south, so it's Vale of Trent has its own microclimate.
Right. Okay. I remember you're in the National Forest. You're just on the near our walls.
That's right.
Yes,
that's right. Right on the edge of the forest. Yeah.
I'm getting there. Anyway, so we've got to go somewhere first. Would you care to go first this evening? Would that be stretching you too much? Hello,
No,
Phil. Hello, Teresa. Nice to see you. Hello, Michael. Nice for you to come in.
there's
Okay.
something I kind of remember, Mike. Last time we were talking about tall stories. Was that for this time or next time?
Right. So so things have moved on a bit because on the next one we were going to do, well, we were going to have a few comedic stories and tall stories.
Right. Okay.
But what we've done is, in conjunction with John and the World's Storytelling Cafe and the Society for Storytelling, not next Thursday, but the Thursday after, which I think is the 24th. And I'll check. John will check the dates for me. We're having Have a Laugh in
I don't think it's the
Lockdown.
20. Is it the? Hold on, I've got my
I
diary.
think it's the
here.
21st. So Janet, we're having Have a Laugh in Lockdown, which is going to be a Thursday evening, and the idea is to come along and tell a funny story or a funny joke, a funny poem, or anything that makes you chuckle.
The 21st is good
like-
to me.
And
21st.
that is going to be at 8:30 in the evening, as opposed to 6 o'clock our usual time.
Yeah.
And I've just got hold of Cosmo Hardy, who's the artistic director of the Foolhardy Circus, and he's coming on to that for us as well. So, so we've got a good start.
But for this evening, Janet, like we always say, everything goes. If you've got a tall story, it's going to have to be pretty bloody tall to beat that Chris Lowe, because he's got some really tall stories, right? When he tells a tall story, he stands on stilts. Okay, but if you
I always tell the truth.
absolutely, as long as I'm sat here riding my bicycle. Okay, so if you want to start off with a tall story, that's fine. But anything else you feel comfortable with is the point this evening.
Right. Okay. Well, it's maybe tall, but more shaggy, more of a shaggy dog story.
Okay.
And stuffed capercaillie in a glass case. He loved the hunt and he loved the chase. Now, let me introduce you to the gentleman hunter. Brown bear standing in the hall. Stag's head mounted on the wall. Tiger skin spread on the floor. Boar's head fixed above the door. And this was the kind of trophy that our gentleman huntsman craved. And he had hunted on every continent: Antarctica, Asia, Europe, Australasia, the Americas. On this particular evening, he was sitting in front of the campfire in Africa. And he was boasting of the traps of the day. And he was musing out loud. I think that big zebra stallion was the best. That skin will look really good over the chaise longue in the gentleman's library. He sat with his Winchester, with his long-barreled Mauser C96 beside him, and his Swiss Luger with him. And he wondered what he would be doing the next day. And sitting close by him was a young local lad who didn't mind hunting for food, but he wasn't sure that he liked gentlemen hunters coming for his game. And he mused to himself. And then he said, "What will we be doing tomorrow?" The hunter said, "I don't know." So he said, "Well, have you ever hunted elephant?" "Of course I have," said the gentleman hunter. The big grey tusker down in the Cape, that was a marvelous hunt." And the young lad said, "What about the green elephant?" "Green elephant? The green elephant?" said the huntsman. "Yes," said the young lad. "It's probably the last green elephant left in Africa. In fact, it may even be the last green elephant left in the world." Said the huntsman. "That sounds a really good trophy." Where do I find this green elephant, this last green elephant in the world? And the young lad said, at the waterhole. What? Which waterhole? Tell me. And the young man whispered in the hunter's ear. And the hunter said, oh, that waterhole, that, shh, don't tell anyone. You wouldn't want anyone else to get there first. Oh, no, that's right, said the great huntsman. But there's something special that you need to know about the green elephant. His sense of smell is absolutely superb. So if you are going for him, you must know about him, that he can scent you from any distance. He could scent your sweat. He could scent the powder in your Winchester. And something else. If you want to trap him, you must present him with his favorite food. And that is, said the huntsman. Ah, well, that is English Christmas plum pudding. Of course it is, said the huntsman. Very wise choice. English Christmas plum pudding. Well, we'll find it. And he called his cook. Come. I want you to provide for me an English Christmas plum pudding so that I can hunt the green elephant, the last green elephant in the world, to be my trophy. And the cook, yes, he was astonished, but you do not question the gentleman hunter. I mean, he pays your wages. So he ordered. He wrote down, and I have the recipe here from Mrs. Beeton's cookbook, 1.5 pounds of raisins, 1/2 pound of currant, 1/2 pound of peel, 3/4 pound of breadcrumbs, 3/4 pound of suet, 8 eggs, and 1 wine glass full of brandy. And the cook thought, well, this is for an elephant, so it needs to be larger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times larger, I think. And he placed the order, and the order came. He tipped each one of the ingredients into a huge cauldron-type stew pot, and over a magnificent wood bonfire, he stirred and he stirred. And then he boiled 5 hours, 10 hours, 15, 20, 25, 30, 7 times, 35 hours he stirred, and when it was finished, it was the most magnificent English plum pudding that you have ever seen or smelt. Cooled, and in the cool darkness, under cover, it was transported to the named waterhole, and there it was placed, right on the edge of the waterhole, where the elephant was bound to find it. Remember, said the young man, do not shoot until the elephant is almost halfway through eating the plum pudding. Because if you do, if you move, he will disappear. Hold your Winchester rifle at his forehead and wait until he's almost halfway through. The scent of that plum pudding was so strong and so drawing to the elephants that they couldn't resist. The scent spread over the waterhole, over the plains, over through the bush, the marshes, the forests, into the jungle. And the green elephant surely did appear. And the huntsman held his rifle towards the broad forehead of the green elephant. and every other elephant could scent it, and followed the trail of the scent, ones in twos, in threes, and they came in their tens, they came in their hundreds, they came in their thousands, and the huntsman held his rifle steady, pointing towards the green elephant, almost ready to shoot. He wasn't quite halfway through. All the other elephants were so jealous. Every last 1,000 of them turned green with envy. And the huntsman, in disappointment, dropped his rifle and left. Now, somewhere in Africa, there are little children still giggling at the story of how their grandfather managed to thwart the hunting of the last green elephant. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, there was back in the day, Janet, when I was a young man. So I'm 66 next month. So I'm talking about I was in my early 20s, 21, 22. I was down in the Forest of Dean and we'd been playing cricket. So it was a summer's evening and it was about 8, 9 o'clock and it was later on. So it was just beginning to be dusk. And an old forester came in and he had an old kit bag in his corner. And he said, "Here, be having my pint if I can, please, but can I have some warm milk, please, because I've got a little water otter here." And the barmaid said, "A water otter?" And he went, "Yeah, I got a water otter, I have." And so the water otter got the warm milk before he got his pint of cider. And he was sat there in the corner and said, "I don't suppose you'd light a fire, would you? Because my little water otter's cold." And so they went and lit the fire and they sat him down by the fire and we was all there. And I was one of the away teams. So I played for Ledbury. So I was down in the Dean. And and I was as curious as anyone. I was 21, 22. I'd never seen an otter, let alone a water otter. Anyway, so we hung around. And then he said, "What we need to do," he said, "is to get a big glass of whiskey and have a little bit of glass. And I'll put a little bit in the warm milk for the water otter. And then we'll just keep it and it'll see it through the night." And so we all had to chip in, didn't we? And we all did. And we all gave him a couple of pence and he got a double whiskey out and he put a little bit in the milk, which he put in the bag, and he picked the rest up and swallowed it down in one, put his hand in the bag and put on the table a small kettle, because that was a water otter. And he had me. He had everybody in the pub, but he had me, and I'm still talking about it 40 odd years later, and you can get it done and everything else, right? So I'm going to put a batting order together. So I'm going to ask Keith to go after when I go to finish talking. Keith, if that would be okay with you, put your hand up. You'll be the next one. So I'm going to put Keith first, and then we'll go to a lady. So Phil, I can see you. Are you looking to do something tonight, or are you going to? You're on mute, so I can't hear you. Put your hand up if you want to do something. Was that a yes or a no?
It was a no.
It was a no. That's okay.
Yeah, I haven't got anything prepared, no.
Okay, we do this once a fortnight, so very welcome to come back. Teresa,
Yep.
Have you got something prepared tonight? Right, so you go next, after Keith. All right, then I'll go to Colin. Then you, Chris, yeah. After Colin. Nod, Chris. Yeah. Michael, are you doing something tonight?
Happy just to listen.
That's fine. Okay. John, are you doing something? We'll get to see how long we are in, shall we?
See how we're doing. I've got a poem that I've only written today that I want to try out if we've still got time. If not, it don't matter.
Okay, fine. You'll pass me the 100 quid later, okay?
Nah.
Right, so we'll go to Keith, and then it's going to go Keith, Teresa, Colin, Chris. And I'm going to do something which I very rarely do when I'm emceeing. I'm going to tell you a story about myself, because I want to tell you what I did this afternoon, because this afternoon I went and bought 50 oak trees and 25 blackthorn trees. Now, I went and paid for them, but at the festival, it's come out to the Get a Word in Edgeways budget, because this is how we're going to offset our carbon footprint. So one of the local farmers, and I live in a place called the Oakdale, he's got gaps in his hedges. So we're going to put the blackthorn bushes in the gaps, That's going to fill up the hedges and make them more viable for the wildlife. And we're going to put the 50 oak trees in appropriate places around his farm so the hedge cutters don't cut the tops of the trees off when they're cutting the hedges. And it's our pilot scheme to do with the festival. So each year we're going to plant so many trees, like I said, to offset the carbon footprint. Now, if you want to see the whole story about this, the Get a Word Online concert is on Thursday at 8 o'clock, and it's all to do with trees. So we've got stories about trees and poems about trees and folklore about trees. And there's me talking about trees and how we're going to plant them and everything else. But the one thing that I didn't know, which is what's really made me buzzing tonight, is that when I went and talked to the guy, and his degree is at Pershall College University, it's a horticultural college. We have arranging to buy 6 Dutch elm resistant elm trees. Now, I didn't know that they existed, but we're going to buy 6 and we're going to put the entrance of Stokes's barn, John. That's where I'm going to put them. I'm going to put them there. And so everybody who comes in is going to see for once in their lives, because I can remember now, John, you lived over the far side of the country, and I don't know if anybody else can remember, but I can remember the elm trees when they went the first time round. Because in Worcestershire, you didn't notice when it was all happening. It was a couple of years later you were driving around and there were no trees. It hit Worcestershire and Hereford and Gloucestershire really, really badly. And it was noticeable. As a little boy, it was back in the 60s. As a little boy, it was noticeable that the trees are gone. Anyway, so for once, I'm telling you a true story about myself, which is what I very rarely do. And I'm going to shut up now. So, Keith, we're going to come to you. Okay, mate?
Okay, yeah. Oh, well, hello, everybody. I live in the Lincolnshire Wolds. And my great-great-great-grandfather was Harry. And he wanted to get married to Mary. And so now Harry could neither read nor write, and so he went to the vicar, and the vicar said, "What's your name then, son?" He said, "Harry Booters." And the vicar wrote down Butters. But what he should have written down is Booters, because he was a bootmaker, not a cobbler. He was a bootmaker, and he could make a set of boots from scratch, cutting out all the leather, stitching it all together, putting the sole on it and the hobnails on it and the holes for the laces, and make them all together. And so there were handmade boots and shoes, and he also used to repair saddles and all things like that. And so that's how my name came about. Rather than Booters, it's become Butters. Now, my coming down the generations, my grandfather was also a bootmaker, but my great-grandfather, his name was Jabez Booters. And he lived in the middle of Lincolnshire Wolds at South Ormsby. And everybody called him Jab Booters. Now, one winter's night, he thought he would go and see his girlfriend, who was working and lived in at Ormsby Hall. Now, you wouldn't normally be able to go and see his girlfriend in the hall. You weren't allowed to visit the staff there. But the squire was away on business. And so he'd finished the work for the day, and he walked down the lane, past Ring Hill on the left-hand side, and a bit further on there was the church, St Leonard's. A bit further on the left-hand side was a school. The school's still there, it's a building. And in actual fact, Jabe, when he was a tiny young lad, he actually went to that school. And people didn't move on in those days, they'd stayed in the same village for generations. And he walked down the lane, and along the left-hand side there's all the parkland, and in the middle of the parkland was Ormsby Hall. But he carried on down the lane, past the Massenbird Arms on the right-hand side, which is still there and serves a good pint, and then past Mr Crow's blacksmith shop. Now, it's no longer a blacksmith shop, now it's owned by a friend of mine called Pete, and he's a cabinet maker, and he can make all these fancy gates and doors and windows and all this panelling. And JB went up to the road, and it was a crossroads. And if he'd gone on, he could have gone straight on up the hill to Walmsgate. But he turned left along the Bluestone Heath Road, which is an old Celtic road. An old Celtic road that runs all the way from Boiler Marsh to Caister, and later taken over by the Romans. But he turned left down the Bluestone Heath Road and into the back entrance, the back driveway into Ormsby Hall. And he went in, and he saw his girlfriend there, and they spent the night together, evening together, kissing and cuddling and doing what young people do. And it came to say good night. And so he opened the back door, and he looked down. He said, "Lass, I can't go out there. There's inch and a half of snow. Everybody'll know that I've been to see you. No. I mean, you'll get a lot of trouble if people know I've been to see you. No, lass, let me out the front door." "James," she said, "it's more my job's worth to let you out through the hole. No, I can't do that." "Lass, just trust me." And so they crept through the hall, and without a word of a lie, they opened the front door, and Jabez, he stepped out backwards into the snow, and he mantled about on the doorstep, and he walked backwards all the way down, about a quarter of a mile, all the way down the main drive until he came to the main drive entrance and to the lane where other people had been walking up and down, and he went home. Next morning, some of the servants that worked at the hall and lived in the village, and some of the grooms, they saw these footsteps in the snow and said, "Ah, Squire's home, we're a bit late. We might lose our jobs if we're not careful." Until I found out that it was Jabez had been to see his girlfriend. So it just goes to show you shouldn't go a-courting on a snowy night. That's absolutely true. I told that story at an old people's home a few years ago, and there was the uncle of a neighbour of mine, Mr. Hallgath. He said, "Yeah, that's true. I knew the old bugger," he says. "It's absolutely true."
Right. Well done, Keith. Well done. Thank you very much. If you go to the city of Durham, down, not because at the top there's the cathedral and the university, but just down a bit, there's a big sort of open square. It would have been the village green back in about 550, but now it's all concrete. And right slap down in the middle is a statue of the Marquis of Belfast on a big horse. And he was the one that owned all the mines around there. And when he died, it was the miners that paid for that statue. So they must have liked him. But every time it snows, somebody goes along and it looks as if he's got off his horse and walked to the toilet. And he goes in the gents, and as he comes in, he always comes out the girls, and he goes back round to the other side of the horse, and he climbs back onto the horse again. And they've done it for years and years and years. So long it can't just be one person. It must have been 2 or 3 or 5 people or whatever it was. But every time it snows, somebody goes and does that there. And it's famous, it is. It's the city of Durham, that is right. So thank you very much, Keith. I said Teresa's next. So we go to Teresa. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to get a poem or a story, but it doesn't really matter. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for that, Keith. I enjoyed that story. I've just got this image of him walking backwards, carefully through the snow. I've got some poems. I've got a turning of the year poem and 3 little lockdown poems, just to uplift our spirits. So, but none of them are in order. So, here's the turning of the wheel poem. It's called Nature's Sweet Prediction. As the bell tolled the death of the old year, the sun blinked awake for the briefest of times, and the hovering light treads its steady step forward, stretching our days and whispering a faint murmuring of spring. Here, Bright bulbs show off their flower heads, waving, tickled to sway by the still chill breeze. The fledgling braves wing, and young mammals stagger to suckle. Onward time marches, onto the days of the high moons, short nights, the dry noons, warming the seedlings that bear into fruits that contain their own future. Then colour, heavenly hues, leaves all aflutter, then flee from their havens to rest on the earth to enrich in decay. The wheel turns once more to shortening light, with crystallized dew to dazzle our view. Our spherical beauty comes back round again, and the bell tolls the death of the old year to herald nature's sweet prediction. The end. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, I've been writing poems in lockdown based on my experience in nature in the previous 24 hours. And so I think quite a few of you will have heard all of these three, but I just wanted to do them today because we're in this tight situation, and I think they will just, their intention is to lift us. So the first one is called Ecstasy. Seduced by the morning, rooted firmly in the world, I explored the mysteries of seven. 7 colours, 7 notes, 7 chakras, 7 days. As I walked towards my goal, there she stood, patient, without distraction, waiting for the right moment. Learning to read the book of nature requires patience, she told me. Out from her grandmother bones flowed a deep contentment, a sense of one who has persevered, realised dreams, knows how to work with the flow of life. Her secret knowledge is seductive. Just at that moment, a great kite flew over my head, wings outstretched in lift, low enough for me to touch. The message was clear. Trust the senses, the inner stirrings, the intuitive promptings of the body that pulled me out and into the day. Flow with the tide of the human heart. When I turned to share this ecstasy, this heart-thrilling wonder, she was gone. Have courage. Are you sat beside a stagnant pool with eyes that cannot see? Swerve then into the rhythms of your deeper nature, where your dreams ripple and inspire. That impulse to serve can light the dark. Bring creative imagination together with compassionate action to pull the young forward. Feel the dragon's breath hot on the back of your neck. Aloneness can bring a sense of wholeness, for there is depth and promise in solitude. Great opportunities can be found within limitation. It's a chance to go deep, open up to that which is hidden in the shadow, for the dark is the place of germination. Cultivate reliability, attention to detail, commitment. Reawaken your inner world, for the dance of creation isn't easy. Have the courage to reach out once more. Join that dance, experience its beauty and depth. Dance courageously, for love is a great healer. Have patience, for the expanse of eternity lies before you. You still have time. When the red dragon calls, a cat can sit with a king, and the most beautiful note is the dying one, lingering, softening, allowing space for a new song. And my last little one is called Can You See It? Through the avenue of oak, maybe we'll be reading this one at Mike Rust's little oak grove one day. Through the avenue of oak came a glimpse. Through the veil of the mist, I saw a twist of something unexpected. Something stirred in my wolf blood veins. I let go of the reins to look at the gains where to others none could be found. I called it a light at the end of the tunnel. Can you see it too? If you do, then speak it. Share with those who seek it. Bring a different hue to the shades of blue. Lift us up through the heights, seeking rights where once were wrongs, putting right the slights of a yesterday coloured with grey. Make a today that's worth living for. Thank you.
Oh, I love your poetry. I think it's wonderful, Teresa. Well done. And you're certainly welcome to come to Shropshire anytime you can fit in. The festival itself, we have story and poetry walks that go through the Wenlock Edge Woods. And so we'll find an oak tree for you, but there's an awful lot of beech and ash up there and some yews, and soon there's going to be some elms again. How about that? Brilliant fun, eh? Right, Colin, we said next, and then Chris after that. So off we are to Northern Ireland, just a few miles north of Larne, and somewhere near the coast, I believe.
That's it. I lived my whole life right on the coast, but in the last sort of 15 years, we have moved back up into the hills. We're worried about sea levels rising, so we've got a wee place up on the top of the hill here.
You haven't gone to the top of the Mourne Mountains. The sea's going to go for an awful lot higher if you're going to get to Mourne Mountain, Colin. And then yes, Michael, you can. Yes, Norman, you can go after Chris.
We'll probably be got before they get the Mourne Mountains. Anyway, we're up here and we've got a few wee sheep and a couple of pigs and a few hens, and yeah, and we're out in the middle of a heather moorland, and there's nobody to fall out with. It's great. So anyway, Teresa, I haven't seen you since before Christmas. That was fantastic as always. Thank you very much. And Happy New Year to everyone. There's one or two maybe that I've seen on Liz's thing since the new year. But anyway, Happy New Year to everyone. Apologies if anyone has already heard this. It might have been on Liz Weir's thing or Maria Watton's. I think I've done this a couple of times since New Year. This is a kind of new one for me here. And it's called The Fairy's Wisdom. And I want to take you back quite a long way in history, way back to the time before, when Ireland and Scotland before they were even fully fledged nations. And of course, at that time, they were divided into smaller kingdoms, and every kingdom had its own chieftain, and they bickered and they fought amongst one another. But probably the most unusual kingdom at that time was one called Dalriada, and it was centred around the Sea of Moyle. And to the southwest was the coast of County Antrim and Rathlin Island, and to the northeast was what we now call Argyllshire, and the Inner Hebrides right up to the Isle of Skye. And it sounds like an odd setup for a kingdom, but at the narrowest point, it was only 14 miles across the Sea of Moyle, and a day's sailing would take you from Skye right down to the most southerly point at Carrickfergus. And far from being a barrier, then the sea really connected everybody in that kingdom, because it was far harder to travel inland than it was over this piece of water. And the people of Dalriada were the one race. They shared a language, dance, song, stories. And this story has its roots in that culture of 1,500 years ago. At that time, you see, people were no different than the people of today. They were sometimes arrogant and narrow-minded and foolish. And of course, just like today, sometimes they were worse than others. But in those early days of Dalriada, the people became so foolish. They were fighting with their neighbours up in the Orkney Islands and down in the Isle of Man. And the fairy folk became so concerned that they decided that they would do something about it, because they thought that their human neighbours were going to destroy the whole kingdom. And so they put it out, they let it be known that they were going to bestow a gift on their human neighbours. And word travelled on the wind and over the sea, and it was carried in the air by the birds, and it went up the rivers with the salmon, and it was spread by the trees. That's why it's important that Mike plants lots of trees so as the fairies can communicate. And it was spread by the animals that ran through the ancient woodland. And on a special day, at an arranged time, the people all arrived at the fairy forts and the fairy hills. And of course, they were apprehensive, but their curiosity overcame their fear. And when the doors opened, the people streamed in. They were dumbfounded at the splendor of these fairy forts. The walls were hung with beautifully delicate woven tapestries made from spider silk and butterfly wings. There were candles everywhere, and this is at a time when people used little rush lamps and that kind of thing, and the light candles were unknown except for the fabulously rich. But the fairy folk had candles made of beeswax in there that made the fairy fort smell of summertime. No one had ever seen the likes before, at least no one who had been able to return to tell the tale. Well, when everyone was assembled, the fairies closed the doors on the outside world, and the festivities began. There were pipers and fiddlers and harpists and dancers, and the fairy folk went round all of their guests, and they handed out these tiny little goblets, no bigger than a thimble, and they had flagons, and they poured out in every goblet a wee dram of this fiery, clear liquid. Just one to every man and woman. "Drink up," they cried, "drink up." And the fairies went round everyone. And they were as cheerful as could be. But the people were still apprehensive, because everyone knows that you're not supposed to take anything from the fairies when you're in their domain. Otherwise, you may never be able to go back to the world of the humans. But on this one occasion, the fairies promised that there would be no trickery. And of course, when the people asked what this liquid was, the fairies said it was the distilled wisdom of the world, matured for 1,000 years. They said that it would fortify them against pride and prejudice and all kinds of foolishness. Well, even so, the people were still nervous. Some didn't trust the fairies despite the assurances, and they sipped very gingerly at this stuff that tasted like really good poteen. Of course, some people downed it in one and took their neighbours and downed that as well. Well, as the last few drops were being poured out, there was the noise like thunder overhead. What we would call here a narration. And it was only when the fairies opened their doors to let their human guests go home was that they discovered the source of this narration. And it was all the people who had arrived late, and they were running round and round the forts looking for the way in. But they were late. They were too late. And so they were sent away empty-handed and with their thrapples dry for the want of a drink. Well, that was a strange, strange event, and it still lives on after 1,500 years. It lives on in the folk memory. And it gave rise, you see, to a very common saying, and that was passed down from generation to generation. It was translated into English from the Gaelic, and it was used to refer to foolish people, someone who's a bit light in the head. And a great word that we use over here for that, and it's clearied. Someone's clearied, they're a bit silly. And when I was a young boy, I often heard my mother say about a clearied person, they must have been behind the door when the fairies were handing out common sense. And sometimes I think that it's near time that the fairies took a hand in human affairs again. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's been a while since I've heard a proper Irish fairy story, and thank you very much, Colin Upman. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
One of my great friends is Eddie Lenahan, and I've sat with him many times, and he's told me proper Irish fairy stories, and you've done it again, and you have pleased my heart. Right, so we're going to go to Chris, and then we're going to go to Norman. Now, Norman, if I get it right, because I haven't, my geography of Canada was hopeless last time we met. Is that right? You muted me. Anyway, we'll go to Chris next, and then I'll see if I can work out where Norman lives. So I hope I've got the right bit of Canada this time. Chris.
Hi, right. Farmers are always moaning. My friend's a farmer.
Hey, Keith, hang on a moment.
And he's always moaning about something. And there was this farmer in Carmarthenshire. He was moaning about a specific issue. And his wife was fed up of him moaning. And what he was moaning about was the fairies were keeping him up in the middle of the night. Him and his wife, actually, but she didn't moan too much, dancing in his field. Now, you and I would just be angry because of keeping you up. But the farmer was angry for a very specific reason. They weren't paying him any rent for the field. And that really does annoy farmers. And his wife said, well, why don't you do something about it and go and see the wise woman in the village? Now, I've made an appeal to the Fairy Equal Opportunities Commission and said, why can't it be a wise man in this story? And they told me it was an oxymoron, so I couldn't have it. Anyway, he went to see the wise woman, and you might think she told him to stand somewhere at midnight with a frog or something like that, the usual stuff with a full moon. But she didn't say that. She just said, it's quite simple, plough the field. He said, what? Plough the field. He said, the fairies don't like dancing in mud. It gets on the diaphanous dresses of the fairy ladies, and it gets on the fairy men's tights. They don't like mud. So he did. And that was the end of his problems, really, or so he thought. And a few weeks later, he was walking through the field, and the first green shoots were coming up of the crop he planted. And as he walked through it, he saw a figure ahead of him. It was smaller than he thought. He just thought it was distant. But when he got near, he could see it was a little man about 2'6" high, maybe. And he was wearing blue tights with yellow boots and a red jerkin and a big green hat with a blue feather sticking out of it. And he had a sword that was well, 6 inches or something like that. And he waved it at the farmer and he said, vengeance is coming, vengeance is coming. And the farmer said, what do you mean vengeance is coming? The fairy said, the fairy king has put a curse on you for what you did to our dancing. Oh, the farmer just, You laugh if you saw this little bloke in tights waving a 6-inch sword. And he carried on. But the next few days and weeks, he got progressively more worried. His hens stopped laying, his cows refused to give milk, his crops began to fail. And eventually he was in the field looking for this little man. And he found him one day and he said, you've got to ask the Fairy King to take the curse off my farm, because I'll be ruined if you don't. And the little man, he took pity on the farmer. And he said, well, I'd like to help you, but I don't think even the Fairy King can take curse off once he's laid it on you. And he said, oh, please, said the farmer, please ask him. I'll meet you in a couple of days and you can tell me. 2 days later, the farmer hurried to the field and the little man was there, his hands on his hips. He said, well, I asked him, and he can't remove the curse, but he said the curse won't go on to you or your children. And the farmer thought, great, that's it, problem solved. And he walked off rejoicing. But he didn't say anything about grandchildren or great-grandchildren. Many years later, one of those was celebrating his engagement to a beautiful local lady. And at the end of the celebration, the party they had in the farmhouse, he decided, well, he'd got to walk home because that's what he did in those days. And they walked past the chapel that they were going to be married in. It was freshly painted and looking spick and span. And he took her home and he gave her a good night kiss. And that's all he did, because they didn't do other things in those days. They were honourable people, not like you or I, perhaps. But anyway, he started to walk back home. But Rees, for that was his name, Rees never got back home. And later his family were to send out search parties, and the search parties and his family looked in all the ditches, down the old mine shafts, in the woods, in the river, and they searched for days and then for weeks, and even some of them went on for months. But nobody ever found Rees. And his disappearance became a sort of legend. And when the gossip in the pub came to a halt, they'd look round and there was a facsimile, there's a local artist who painted of Rees on the wall. They'd start discussing about the disappearance of Rees. Now, that could be the end of the story, but I have to ask you, do you want to know what happened? Wave if you want to know what happened, because otherwise I'll have to stop the story now. All right, I'll tell you. As Rees walked back from kissing his fiancée goodnight, he passed a large tree that he'd passed on many occasions before. But this time he noticed at the base there was a small door open, big enough for him to get through, but only just, and there were steps leading down. And he decided to investigate. Now, you or I should never go down underneath trees, down steps, through smallish doors, because that usually leads to the land of fairy. And you or I don't belong in the land of fairy. But when he got down to the bottom, there were the fairies. They were dancing and having a ball. And the Fairy King called him over and gave him drink and gave him food. Well, to cut a long story short, he stayed there that night. And indeed, for a few days more, the Fairy King took him hunting and fishing and walking and riding. And in the end, Rees said, look, I'll have to go. It's been great being here, I must admit, but my family will be worried about me. I better go. And the Fairy King said, okay, see you. And Rees started to walk back home. And as he walked back home, he walked past the chapel. And when he looked at the chapel, the doors were nearly falling off their hinges. Paint was peeling, panes of glass were smashed, tiles were coming off the roof, thistles and thorns and whatever were growing out the windows and under the door. And as he walked on past a field, instead of horses pulling a plough, he saw a big chain stretched across the field, and either side there was some sort of engines pulling this chain, steam coming out of them. And then as he walked on, he got near the farm, he noticed some men in the farmyard, and they were dressed peculiarly. They weren't dressed at all like him. And as he got near to the door of the farmhouse, he heard laughing and joking and a bit of singing as well. He pushed open the door to his farmhouse, and there were all these strangers there making merry. And he said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm Reese. This is my farmhouse. You better get out. I don't know who you are, but you can get out now." And he protested. And as he did so, a young woman came up to him and said, "This is my father's farm. I don't know who you are, but we live here." And he said, "Oh, no, I live here." She said, "I'll get my father." He said, "You do that. You go and get your father." And she walked out into the fields where the old man was. And the old man was leaning on his stick, supervising everybody, as old men do, telling them how to do this and how to do that. And they'd started by, etc., etc. And she said, "Father, there's this chap, this Reese fellow, and he's saying we should get out of the farmhouse because it's his." And the old man, something was clicking in his head, Reese, and he remembered the picture in the pub that they discussed this. Anyway, he walked back in, and there was Reese still protesting. And the old man's eyesight wasn't so good, and he was thinking about that picture. He leaned forward on his stick, and as he leaned forward on the stick, which was a bit of a cudgel, like a knob at the end, he raised the knuckle of Reese very gently, and the 200-year-old skin split, and the dust that was Reese poured onto the floor, and a wind swept through the door, whirled in the pile of dust, and blew it out over the farmland, and Reese disappeared. End of story.
Nice one, Chris. Thank you. It's nice to be in your company again. Normally, Chris and I, we've been part of the Tales from the Edge Storytelling Club for too many years, if you add it all up, Chris, really.
Yeah, too many. Yes, yes. I've seen you too many times.
Yeah.
I should add, by the way, that's my favourite Welsh traditional story.
Your favourite?
Favourite Welsh traditional story. It's traditional Welsh story. I added a little bit at the end, but otherwise the story is pure Welsh.
Right. Well, I heard it up in the hills in Paris, so I don't think it comes from one particular place.
Well, maybe not. When do stories ever come from one particular place?
Well, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. Very true. Right, Norman. Well, now we've worked today with a lot of working on geography. He comes from Canada, which is just north of America.
And I remember the struggle I had to, well, where are we anyways? And when you say in relationship to this, well, where's that? And so
I was absolutely hopeless. So we're leaving it like that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, just think of the Great Lakes. Most people can vision them, and and I'm kind of hugged by the Great Lakes in the middle of it.
Right.
That's my location.
So what time is it in your time?
Right now it's nearly 2:00, and I was just reminded of this by Facebook, and so my apologies for being late.
That's okay. No, it's lovely to see you again. It really is.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I have been inspired by the other stories, because
we've had some cracking stories tonight. Fair play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do, it's not like I haven't done this before, but I'd like to tell a story that I've, in a sense, never brought out to public before. In fact, I just thought about telling it when I heard the stories and bring it. And it's a factual story. I never say true story because all stories are true. And I don't say that as a ha-ha. I mean, they are true. And when we hear them, they come alive. So, bit of context. I understand I'm a bit concerned about time. Years ago, when I had slightly less beard than I do now, and I started growing it in order to be eligible for this presentation. And So the story about hedges and the past and the present and the future is what inspired it. And back then, when I was a storyteller in residence outdoors, which is a wonderful place at a children's rehabilitation hospital, and it was underneath these trees that used to be the line, a driveway for a family that used to be, just say that they were bloody rich. And they gave their land along the ravine to the city of Toronto, as long as every piece of the land was used for hospitals. So there's the Sunnybrook, there's a heart hospital, there's the CNIB for the blind, and there's a children's hospital. And underneath these ancient trees, I was a storyteller. And one day there came a man from the Guelph Arboretum, and he had 3 bushel baskets. And each of one of them had twigs, or so it looked. And what he told us, he said, well, what I have here are elm trees. And elm trees, they died out. There aren't any. I remember as a child seeing the trunks of the last trees that died decades before. And even the trunks now have rotted and fallen into the ground. But he explained to us, and he was a tall fellow, very lanky, the sort of person who thinks he steps out of a story, and he had a long beard. And he said, these elms are the descendants of bringing together the seeds of elm trees in North America along with the trees in Europe, because the trees in Europe grew up with a story of how to fight the Dutch elm disease carried by the beetles. And so what we have done is we've crossbred them with the North American elms that can live in this climate. And we have 3 of them here to give as a gift to the Children's Spiral Garden outdoor program. And that was wonderful. 3 of them. Like I said, they look like twigs, but he assured us they were living trees. So shortly after that, we had all the kids come together. We told stories, played music, and we planted the first tree, which was the tree of the past. And it already had its leaves out, so we felt that it could take the shock. A few weeks later, and we're starting to get the end of July, we planted the second tree, which was the tree of the present. And again, on the grounds, we dug the hole, we played music, we told stories, and the children enjoyed it, as they always do, or did. And then finally, there was 1 bushel basket with 1 skinny looking tree, about the thickness of my little finger. And the buds on it were still closed. No swelling, nothing to indicate that it was alive. And they all thought it was dead and it was tucked away in a corner and forgotten. But I brought water to it. I kept it watered. I kept it, and then nothing happened. And finally, one day I got angry, so to speak. And I put a little wagon, and I put a blue blanket on it. I covered the blanket with flowers. There's flowers that we can pick in there. And then I went over to Cheryl LaRondelle, a Cree storyteller and singer, and said, look, we got to wake this plant up. And it's not paying attention to what's going on around it. Therefore, I want you to help me wake up this tree. I swear, this is the way I worked in those days. Still do, I guess. So we wandered. I put the bushel with the twig, dead looking twig, and pulled it along. And Cheryl pulled the wagon. And she was singing in Cree all along the way, some song that she never did tell me what she was singing. I went to the paint area and told the tree about how wonderful things that the children were creating. We went to the garden and says, look at all the flowers that you're missing because you're not coming out. And we went to the woodworking area where the kids were hammering and banging away and said, look, these kids are making sculptures and yet you don't know where they are, anything about them. And so finally it came back to the beginning, and where the spiral was, it's a pathway. We left it there for a couple of days, and the buds began to swell, and the first leaves began to grow on it. So of course we planted it. It was a tree of the future in a big part of the field that was still on the grounds. And we were visited by a Anishinaabe storyteller. The kids threw a parade. We planted it. There's tobacco. There was a priest from Sri Lanka who started on a similar program for the children of Batacaloa, Sri Lanka. And the tree of the future was planted with great ceremony. And I wish I could end right there, but I can't. Because you see, although the tree began to grow, and it was about 15, 20 feet tall, and the other trees were in a similar state, they decided to raise money, rebuild the hospital. The whole thing was torn down, and along with the tearing down was the cutting down of the 3 trees of the past, the present, and the future. And so that's where the story is right now. People don't remember this story. I'm the only one who seems to remember the story. Not even Cheryl remembers this incident. But when you talked about planting the elms in the gaps, that really hit me. And so I'm making my notes right here. I want to tell that story and make it a story to be told where there's a happy ending. And hopefully, the happy ending is I'm going to go back to the Guelph Arboretum when we can, and I'm going to ask them for a 4th elm. I'm going to ask for it to be planted in the grounds of the Children's Rehab Hospital. And maybe after all, this story will have a happy ending. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I can help you with the happy ending, Norman, because the trees you're looking for are Wingham. That's W-I-N-G-H-A-M.
Okay, could you do that again, please?
Wing, W-I-N-G.
Yeah.
H-A-M. And they are a combination of the elm-resistant trees to the beetle from Holland and from Pershore in England.
Oh, okay.
And the scientists have put them together to make them a Dutch elm disease resistant tree.
Dutch elm, okay then.
Okay, and because they worked out that the beetles fly at such a height, and they've worked, and the scientists have got together and they've done it. And it was basically done in Amsterdam, apparently. But there was some English people. There was a very famous lady down in Worcestershire, and she's had a hand in it, apparently. And so we're getting, I've ordered 6. So if I can get 3, we'll call them the past, the present, and the future, and we'll put them at the entrance to the festival.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounds a really good idea, and we'll put the other 3 somewhere else. So.
Yes, thank you. Now I apologize for the roughness of the story. I haven't shaped it. That was the first telling. And,
well, I'll tell you what, sometimes when you're telling a story, there are things in England that John and we know plenty of. They're called rough diamonds. John and I know many people like that.
No, not at all, Mike.
I've got a feeling Colin Unwin knows a few rough diamonds as well. Anyways,
hey.
Anyway, it's a lovely story, and thank you for telling it to us. I really do. I'm going to tell that story. Can you? Yes. Right. I'll get back to you about that. I'm going to tell that story.
Oh yeah. No, it is. And the one thing that does get to me is that Cheryl, all the others, they've forgotten this story. The site is covered up with a huge building now. The ground is not even there anymore.
There's always a place for another tree.
There's always room for another tree.
There's always room for a tree. And somewhere in the gardens, there's room for a tree.
There will be a tree. We'll make room.
And as long as the story's told, everything lives, and you're keeping things alive there, Norm.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't need everyone to remember it. Just you.
Yeah,
right, it's 7:15. So what I'm going to do now is, because I know John wants to do a poem. So John,
John.
No, it's okay. It's all about you. I have got a request, because can I just for 2 seconds?
I'm finished. Hang on a moment. Then while John's doing his poem, I'm going to nip off to the toilet. Then I'm going to get them to leave the Zoom account open for a few minutes so we can just have a chat. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so John, I'm going to just leave for 2 minutes. So if you do it, your poem.
Right. Yeah. Fine, Mike. Beautiful. Right. Well, we've had so many fantastic storytellers on tonight, and someone can tell Mike what I said, because and I've already asked Michael Faculty, but I'm glad you finished on talking about children there, Norman, because on Friday nights on the cafe, we put on every Friday night we put on someone who tells stories for children. And to a lot of the children that's listening, we've got, I mean, there's a whole general audience, but there's some special disabled children that come every week to it. It's become very special to them. So anyone who would like to do a 45-minute set for me on any Friday night, and just get in touch with me, I'd be truly grateful, because that Friday night thing has become an important part, as far as I'm concerned, of what the cafe does. Right, I just want to try this out. I don't know. It's a kind of mixture of banal and mixed up. But it's always good to read something the day you write it, because it might be that horrible that you never do it again. So. It's fine to be kind. It's all right to stay bright. It's not bad to be sad. It's up to you to be true. But if you take out your frustration on strangers, wrapping it up in warped theories of personal persecution and taking it as a license to scream abuse at everyone who disagrees with your borrowed views, it doesn't excuse you, nor disabuse you of the consequence of your actions. But there are alternatives. You could, for instance, hold out your hand. Take a stand to protect another from aggression. Nothing is stopping us from doing the shopping for someone else, passing on a smile. It's been a while since self-interest became the main interest. Strange enough, the change came in the midst of a storm, so the norm became something softer, where the lies crumble in the face of harsh reality. Yes, it's fine to be kind, even if we are being overcome by a communal sadness. Thank you, Mike, for sorting tonight. We're going to retire to a little bit of a thing tomorrow night. We have what I announced this at the beginning of the night. We've got Connecting the World by Story, where we're doing stories of politeness and rudeness. We've got a couple of storytellers. So anyone who wants to jump in there tomorrow night with a story of either politeness or rudeness or both, you're welcome. So we'll retire for either a coffee or whatever, a tipple, to our Zoom room. Mike, yours.
Hi there. So if you all unmute yourselves. And then we've started doing this in lockdowns in the UK, where if you have a Zoom meeting and there's a few people around, just leave it open for 10 to 15 minutes. People can just have a chat and just talk to each other. It's just something that we're trying to do. I don't know how you're getting on, Norman, but we've got another lockdown here, and we've got some wonderful politicians that we just about don't trust.
Get me started.
And it's looking a bit grim, to be fair. So
I know, and my heart goes out to you. We're not as bad here in Ontario, but unfortunately, we've got the same politicians who have been misstepping, saying, "Oh, let's not do this," or "Now we got to do this," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Other provinces have been luckier, and their COVID rates are down, but here in Ontario, so I'm still here inside.
Well,
my brother's on Vancouver Island, and they just about stopped all the ferries, so they kind of don't let anyone on at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We've got a new variant we have, so we've managed to develop something that's worse than everybody else. So.
Yeah. But
I've got some friends in Colorado, and they're absolutely petrified of what's going on both COVID wise and political wise in the USA.
Yeah.
Oh well, I've got friends in California, and some of them. It's because I know so many people, Chris. It's black and white. It really is. It was like the old apartheid days. Some people thought it was just education, and some thought the other side of it. And I couldn't. There's two people in California. I couldn't put them in the same room today. They'd start killing each other because some think that Trump is right and some think that he's not. You know, and America's so split on that at the moment. It's unbelievable. But, I didn't really want to break this into a conversation about Donald Trump in America. I wanted something cheerful.
The most cheerful thing we can do is move away from that subject and just talk about
Well,
quality of whiskey, for instance.
I want to just pick up that there was a lot of talk about trees today, and I'm really a fan of trees. And I really like that when there's a very obvious theme that comes through an evening, and I felt like a bit out of place. So I was wondering if I could just share my little 12-line tree poem with you.
You absolutely can.
Thank you. It's a silly one, and it was about me sort of coming out. So I told her bold. I did admit. She laughed until her sides had split. The tears, they fell upon her knee. She can't believe I'd hug a tree. Gentle, tall ones of the land love the tender touch of hand. When I say that they love me, she can't believe I'd hug a tree. Now that people cannot meet, their looks of longing cross the street. But I'm all right, Jack, filled with glee, 'cause actually the tree hugs me.
Yeah.
But I love a good tree, and I loved hearing your story about the trees, Norman. And I thought that was really inspiring of Mike to give you that idea with his own ideas. And to me, we should be planting millions of trees all over the planet. So that's been really uplifting to hear those tree plantings going on. And Norman, you've got to plant that tree.
Right, trees, stick your head over the parapet, because in the autumn we're going to have about 10,000 hedgerow trees to plant. I'll give you.
I'm coming. I'll be there.
Give you the time and the day, and I'll tell you when to turn. Otherwise, I'm on a sick note. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'll be there.
Okay. So
I want to find out more about this gap work or whatever. It's
over here in the UK, Norman, we have the traditional hedges that go back sometimes hundreds of years, but sometimes there's for whatever reason there's a hole in the hedge, and so what we're going to do is going to fill in all the holes, and if we fill in all the holes in South Shropshire where we are, that would be go a long way to offset the carbon footprint of the festival. So that's what we're doing. But years ago, back in Worcestershire, there was an old farmer, and this is when they had a horse and ploughs, and he taught his young boy, he was about 11, to plough the field across the place was called Elmley Castle, and it was called the Home Farm in Elmley Castle, and the family were called Redgeberry. And Reg himself told me this story. He took me to the hole in the hedge, and he said, we're going along, and when he was 11 years, he turned around to him and went, "Yeah, Dobbin, yeah!" And Dobbin would get to the end, he would turn around and he'd go back in the other direction, right? But then the farmer, the grandfather, decided the little boy needed an education. So they sent him off to the school. And he went down to Cheltenham Boys' School, not the girls' school. He went to the boys' school, and he stayed there from he was 11 till he was 16. And when he came back, his grandfather said, go and plough that field over there with the old horse like you did when he was 11. So he was going across the field, and when he got to the end, he said, "I say, Dobbin, would you care to turn round?" And the horse went straight on and made a hole in the hedge. And that's the hole in the hedge we're going to fill up. Okay.
After that piece of nonsense, I've got a nonsense poem my mom taught me, and it's not very long. Does anybody want to hear it?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Old Jan Shores, you'll never see no more. She pulled the parson's pulpit down to make a pigsty door. She had a little dog and Pongo did 'em call. And when he cocked up his leg, he peed all up the wall. And when he saw the steamer rising, he thought the world on fire. So he cocked up his little leg and he peed a little higher.
Oh,
That's as artistic as we get in Birmingham.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you don't mind,
no.
if you,
Birmingham,
if you don't
Birmingham's
mind,
where artists go to do the work and not get famous, isn't it?
Ooh.
Well, no, I meant that as a compliment. You know, you actually do stuff. You know, you don't talk about doing it. You do the work.
Oh yeah, City of 1,000 Trades.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm gonna suggest that if you don't mind me taking your idea and passing it on to the Glens Festival here. That's a brilliant idea, actually, to put a wee bit of money aside and plant a few trees in the Glens here to offset the carbon footprint of the festival. That's a great idea.
So what happened, Colin, was I used to play dominoes down at the local pub on a Thursday evening with what you call the traditional farmers from Shropshire, but you've got them in your part of the world as well. You know who I'm talking about. And they're all playing dominoes. And I asked them, I said to them, what was the best way of doing this? And their idea was to gap the hedges. And the expression is this, and you have to say it in a Shropshire accent, right? You have to gap the edges, Mike, and plant the trees in an appropriate places. Because if you don't plant the trees in appropriate places, the hedge cutters will cut the tops off them. So your trees won't get any higher than the hedges. So ask the farmer first before you put your tree in. And that's when, so then that way the hedge cutters won't cut the top of the hedge of the trees off. Right? So that's the whole thing you have to say. Okay.
Brilliant.
And then is that festival Liz Weir's festival? Is the one that she helps?
Yeah, it's going to be October. Who knows? I mean, what are you thinking for your festival, Mike? Is it going to go ahead live, virtual, or are you just playing it by ear?
The only problem we see at the moment, and I'll tell you in the end, the decision will be made by about the end of February. There's a couple of guys who do it. It'll be me and a fellow called Tim probably. It's to do with the insurance. And if we can get the appropriate insurances, and they'll have to be UK government backed, because you're going to have some kind of insurance that will insure you against somebody coming to the festival and leaving and saying, I got COVID at that festival. So until you get around that one, and at the moment the people who are talking to the government are people like Glastonbury and the big Leeds festivals, and over here Sidmouth and Whitby are the folk festivals, Colin. And these big boys are talking to the festival and they're saying, if you don't do something, then there won't be any field festivals at 2021. And they've already got a subcommittee in the Houses of Parliament, that's the Westminster Houses of Parliament, to do a UK thing. And we're waiting for the answers, but it's only the first week in January yet. And we've got all this COVID stuff and Brexit and everything else. So we're waiting for an answer for that. And if we get that answer, then the answer is yes. We're having a festival.
And do you think that a lot of field festivals will go ahead if the government say, yeah, we're going to back the insurance?
Yeah, we've got to start. They've got to do it. There's a thing over here called the Association of Festival Organisers. They're AFO. It's run by a bloke called Steve Heath that used to run Sidmouth and Tarrasy. He's given them to the end of January because you've got to start booking the artists. They can't leave it any later than that. And so they've got a deadline from the festival organisers, and we're expecting a positive answer. It's the 10th of January now, so they've got 20 days. Okay.
Yep.
So that's where
Fingers
we are.
crossed. Yeah.
Okay. And some of the festivals the ones that for March and April are cancelling already because they can't book the artists and they've got no firm things on it. When this is like, the MG Vintage Motor Car Festival in the middle of Northampton or something, those ones that happen around just after Easter and May Day and places like that. Okay. So that's where we are at the moment. So, but
I play in a band as well, a Ceilidh band. I have done it 20 years, and we would do about 70 weddings a year, all over Ireland, sometimes Scotland as well. But anyway, we had everything obviously wiped out until this spring. And the booking sheet is full from March, but just this week they've just started dropping like 9 pins, or just people pulling out left, right, and centre. So people are thinking this year's going to be a washout.
So what's the band?
It's Ceilidh band, Haste to the Wedding, Ceilidh band.
Haste to the Wedding. Well, that's a good name for a Ceilidh band for a wedding. So what instrument?
Well, sorry, Mike.
So what do you play?
I kind of do everything. I play the banjo, sing, but mainly the caller. I get the people up and teach them the dances very, very quickly, and yeah.
Oh, I need to book you for 2022, Colin, October.
Yeah.
You'll have to come and do I'm having a big party.
Get it in, get the booking in.
Book it in,
literally have
pencil
bookings
it
up to
in,
20.
October 2022, Northamptonshire, England.
Right. Okay.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
You've got to give them nectar points as well as the fee, don't you?
Oh,
What's that?
You got to give them
nectar point to that one.
You don't give them nectar points, they don't come. Okay.
No, I'm serious, and I'm booking John as well. John, put that in your diary. 2022 October.
Right.
I'll make sure I'm in the country.
I'm going to be 60, so I'm going to have a big celebration, and I want a Ceilidh band. So you're booked.
Okay. Well, it sounds as if we're all going to Northampton.
Yeah, you can all come. You're the first ones to be invited.
Norman, you're going to need a jar, mate, and start putting $1 in it from time to time.
So I want storytellers, poets, and musicians, and there'll be children, lots of children, because I have 11 great nephews and nieces. So there'll be plenty of entertainment going on for everyone.
But if you need Father Christmas, I know a really good one, and he doesn't do much time of the year.
No, he's going to come and do stories for me. You're booked, John.
Yeah, but there's a couple of us here. We don't want a Santa fight on Zoom.
I can see 5.
We just
My
clones
birthday's
of each other.
It's more Halloween than Christmas, though. So.
Oh well, that's you and me and Michael. Then we'll do that.
Turn up as a pirate, a Halloween pirate ghost.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right. I'm going to go now, folks, because I've got a friend waiting to chat. So thank you all for a lovely evening. I've really enjoyed it. Love
thanks,
the trip
Teresa.
stories. Thank you.
Yeah.
All soon. Colin, put that in your diary.
Yeah, and if you can make it on the Thursday, a week on Thursday for the Have a Laugh in Lockdown.
A week on Thursday.
Yeah, come and
Yeah,
do.
and our next one of these, obviously, it's really easy with this one on the 10th. The next one's on the 24th. Yeah.
Yes.
So brilliant. Anyway, keep an eye on the program and the cafe. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Michael,
Bye.
thank you for keeping good order.
Yes.
Right, John.
Bye there.
Thank
Bye,
you.
folks.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Annie, for driving the bus. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.